Okay, thank you very much. Nara, I just want to ask Nara, are you seeing the presentation side to side?
Yes.
Okay, so then I think I can
Would you
continue
rather me
sharing.
share the screen?
Yes, I would. I would prefer if you did that.
Okay. Okay.
And I just have to say, you guys, before I start, I am so happy to see Gina Price here because she is the one who was instrumental in bringing sociocracy to Brazil. So, oh my gosh, Gina, I am so, so happy to see you. Oh my gosh. We love you in Brazil. Everyone remembers you all the time. So anyways, I guess I'll start by saying my name is Tanya and I'll be presenting today with Nara. And we're going to be talking about anti-patterns. So what are anti-patterns? Solutions for common problems that tend to make them worse. So when we often think that we have a solution to something and we think it's a great idea, but actually we create greater problems in the end. Okay, so let's continue on here. About us, I'm Canadian, but I live in Brazil. And I'm from the organization Sociocracy Brazil. I'm one of the founders. I'm also part of SOLT Brazil, which is, it was inspired by SOFA. So it's a Sociocracy Girl. It's an online course that was inspired by SOFA and we've brought it to Brazil. And also I am part of Bio Inspirar, which is a collective of consultants. And Nara is also part of these three groups, and she can introduce herself as well. But we're both sociocracy trainers and consultants. And I'll let her talk a little bit about herself before we go on.
Yeah. Well, I think she she said almost everything about me, but just to say hi, I'm here to support Tanya because we have been working together in a few projects, a few consulting jobs of implementation of sociocracy in Brazil, and we have been learning a lot from all of that. So thank you.
Okay, so let's go to the next slide then. So what's an anti-pattern? Okay, so I explained a little bit what an anti-pattern is, but maybe you haven't heard the term before and it's actually not that new. It was actually coined in 1995, but became more popular when a book was written about anti-patterns, especially in the area of software development. So there's actually a book about anti-patterns, and if you go to the wiki about anti-patterns, you can find a whole bunch of anti-patterns. So if anyone wants to find out more, there's quite a bit of information on the internet. And we've been looking at anti-patterns because the more consulting that we've been doing, we realize that when we're able to focus in and hone in on some anti-patterns that are happening, it helps people to make a cultural change within the organization. Because often we think that we're doing something that's helpful, but when we really realize it's not, then it provides people more incentive to do something differently. And then what we do is we look at what are the sociocratic patterns that we can implement in place of these anti-patterns. So I'm going to present two anti-patterns that are quite common, just so you can get an idea of what I'm talking about. So one anti-pattern might be a career path is important because it motivates employees, okay? It's not that it doesn't motivate employees. It is, but it's not necessarily the only motivation that employees have. So what is the bad habit that this can create if we feel like this is the pattern that we need to implement into our organization? First is there's the Peter principle. And that is that in a hierarchical system, all employees tend to be promoted until they reach their level of incompetence. So if we are on this career path, you're going to keep on moving up until you find that you're in a place where you're not using your talents, where you're actually incompetent in that role and maybe not very happy. So that doesn't necessarily motivate people. And when the career path is one of the only paths to success, then we don't look at the singularities and uniqueness of people and look at how we really can promote the best of them within our organization. So what are some patterns that we can use? So instead of having to implement this pattern that based on the career path, what are some patterns that we can use? We can use peer review. By doing peer review, we can recognize people's skills while they're in their roles. We can create processes to listen and understand people's interests and dreams and motivations, and maybe create roles that help people to bring their interests and dreams into the organizations that they're part of. And when we can connect the individual purpose to the organizational purpose, this is not only good for the person, but it's excellent for the organization. Okay, and then another one that's really, really common is about salaries. So we can go on to the next one. Salaries are best kept secret to avoid embarrassment. Well, that just causes a huge amount of bad habits. So one, we avoid the subject of money, which is always difficult for most people. It's easier for people to talk about sex than to talk about money. So, you know, it is very taboo. One or very few people, they're usually in an organization, one or very few people are responsible for setting salaries. So that's a lot of responsibility for one person. When we're not transparent about salaries, this reinforces the imbalance of wages between men and women. And it reinforces the big difference in salaries due to hierarchical positions. So what are some of the patterns that we can implement and that we find in sociocracy? There are a lot of ways that we can deal with salaries in a sociocratic organization. Each organization can decide what type of agreements they want around salaries, and they can consent to that. They can create agreements that promote transparency. They can look at alternatives like money pile or slicing pie or using an equation, or where people can present a proposal where they actually come up with how much they want to be paid and then present that to a circle that decides what is okay and what is not, or they can do that by peer evaluation, get feedback on the price that the salary that they're giving to themselves. And when we do this, we commit to balanced wages and we commit to healing the wound around money. Okay, so these are big things. So Nara and I, together with one other person that we work with, we were part of, we consulted in one organization, and it was a green organization. If we look at the levels of LaLu, it's an organization that has about 90 people, 80 people. Green in the way that they function more as a family. They really are people focused. They like to do everything together, decide everything together. And so we're bringing this case study to you to come up to show some of the anti-patterns that we found in this type of environment. Okay, so first I'll just let you know a little bit how how we approach this consultancy. So it was a year-long consultancy, and we did a kickoff training for 3 days where we helped to design the organization and decide where we were going to focus our pilot project. So we didn't start in the entire organization. We started in one circle, and then we started going into other circles and structuring other circles. Then we did another 3-day workshop leveling the field, because we felt like some people weren't ready to commit to sociocracy. And also we had to do a lot of taking care of relationships, because in this transition, some people weren't really ready for this. And so we did 2 sessions, 2 3-day workshops, and there was some time between them. And then there was a year-long process where we were coaching essential roles, the facilitator, the secretary role, and the operational leaders. We would accompany the circle meetings. We would give online support whenever questions were asked. We provided 6 online active courses to hone in on key points that they were working on. We made a lot of videos that could support them in their work, and also gave them homework throughout the year. We set up an information management system so they could take care of their agreements and their meeting notes and everything. And we celebrated along the way, and also at the end to help them move forward with next steps. And what were some of the pains that we were working with, just to have an idea? Some of the pains and tensions that were prevalent when we started. There was a lot of gossip, and people had a fear of speaking up, even though it was a green organization. This is a national organization, so they have a lot of different regional circles, and they weren't integrated. And instead of sharing information, they would hide information, because they were scared that they might be doing something wrong and they would get in trouble. Usually they would make their big decisions in a general assembly meeting by consensus, which was once a year. And then after that, there would be teams that would operationalize the work, but they didn't have autonomy. So they'd always get blocked along the way. There was a coordinator circle who would always deal with the tensions. And so they became like this centralized decision-making circle when there was no general meeting. Many agreements were made in tribal spaces, but they weren't written down anywhere. So you really didn't know what the agreements were. There was harsh feedback and meetings without structure, without autonomy, and without participation. So these are some of the things that we were working on. Okay, and just to have an idea what the organization looks like, there are 4 subcircles and there are 9 sub-subcircles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 subcircles, okay? So that's a little bit about the organization. We can go into the anti-patterns now. So the first anti-pattern is operational leader and representative wait for the okay from the circle. So what we would find is that the operational leaders and the representatives will go to the general circle meeting or to another circle meeting where, not necessarily the general circle meeting, but where there was the higher up circle. And instead of making a decision, they would say, okay, well, I'll have to check back with my circle. So I'm going to ask, instead of me going through all the information, maybe we can see how this works. You can open up your microphone and tell me what kind of bad habits you think this might cause, or you can put them into the chat. But what kind of bad habits does this cause if we do that? If the operational leader and the representatives always feel that they need to go back to their circle before they can make a decision? Anyone? I can feed you all the information, but it might be boring.
I can propose something.
Sure.
Do you want us to lift our
Go for
hand or no?
No, go for it. Go for it.
Okay. There's something we call a sovereignty of the circles. So you have to, once you know your domain, you should just go ahead and make the decisions within the
Right.
domain.
Yeah.
Asking everyone, then you're going to postpone a lot of things.
Exactly. Things take a lot longer. Yeah. The role of leader or the operational leader and the representative, they just lose their value. Let's see, there's some.
There is a few people saying also, it could delay the decision, circle not moving ahead, damaging power distribution and autonomy.
Exactly. Okay, good. So let's go on to the next slide just so we can see what some of the answers are. What we found. So we found that the operational leader and the representatives, they didn't even value their own perception and they didn't assume responsibility. And that's partly to do because there was this fear of getting things wrong and being and feeling guilty for getting things wrong. Okay. And what happened, the members in the subcircles, they didn't feel represented. There was this fear of punishment. Decision-making became more bureaucratic, and the operational roles and the LO and the representative lost their significance. So didn't make much sense. Why do we have these roles, right? And what are some of the patterns that we can use? Use authority that's been assigned to us. And this was very difficult for people. It was very difficult for them to accept that they had authority. And they had to be really coaxed into that and supported and coached into that. Operational leaders and delegates trusting their ability to make decisions. So once they started along the way, then they would trust in themselves more and more. Create conditions for continuous improvement nurtured by practice. So this is good enough for now. Let's put it into practice and let's learn as we go along. Create an environment that's open to making mistakes and increase confidence in decision making and taking responsibility for them. So this was really about trying to work on creating an environment where it was okay to make a mistake. And remember that there was harsh feedback in this organization. So we really had to work on that as well. Letting people know it was okay, and also helping people to understand that to do sociocracy, we need to be able to deal with error and look at error as something very positive. Okay. Every tension is relevant. What are some bad habits when every tension is relevant? Put it in the chat, or you can.
I'm thinking that people are always worried about what the other thinks.
Yeah.
and
Okay.
having them come down on them for that.
Okay. What else?
Too much self-reflection and not enough attention to what's going on in the circle.
Right, exactly. Not necessarily the tension can be dealt with in that circle. Right.
And
It might be relevant to the organization, but there might be a role that deals with it or another circle that deals with it.
And in the chat we have not letting the circle be effective in achieving its aims, and fear of destructive conflict.
Okay, so good. So let's check them out, Nara. What do we have here? Difficult to prioritize from Senket. Yep. Okay, so when attention is outside the circle's scope, what does that mean? That means that often the meetings become very tiring because we don't realize it. We start processing things that aren't ours. Okay, and it's even more difficult to reach resolution because we don't have autonomy to deal with that. Decisions can be made even though we're not dealing with tensions that we can deal with, and we invade the dominion of other roles and circles. And when attention isn't returned to its owner and said, oh, listen, this is in the wrong place, we don't empower people to learn about the organizational structure and to learn how to be change agents by referring tensions to the right through the right channels. And what are the patterns? Okay, so refer attention to the circle or role that has authority to deal with it. So how do we do that? Members, verify if the tension is in the right place by doing what? Checking the purpose and responsibilities, getting to know the organization. Instruct the secretary to always verify if the tensions in the backlog are within the scope of the circle. And refer tensions to roles when possible. And we really want a lot of roles to be able to deal with tensions. The more that we have roles that have autonomy to deal with tensions, the better. Because then we're able to deal with them with in a much quicker way. Okay, Nara, let's go on to the next. Informal spaces for making structural decisions. Okay, so what happens when we make decisions at the bar or in the hallway or on WhatsApp? What happens? What are the bad habits that happen? And this we found a lot. This really happened a lot. And this was something that was really difficult for the organization to transition into, because people who had influence and power, they would end up making their decisions at the bar and then just telling people the next day, oh, we've made this decision and this decision, and people didn't know what to do. They're like, okay, fine. So I see that there are quite a few responses in the chat, Nara.
Yes, no transparency, not everyone is informed, equivalence destroyed, feelings of manipulation and hidden agendas, lack of trust, feelings of being left out.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's look at what are the bad habits. I don't think I'm even going to need to mention any of them. I think that they've all been said in the chat. And there is also the question of lobby. You know, people can use these informal places to lobby their own needs. We don't have a pattern that we're using necessarily, so people don't have a space to bring questions or reactions or objections. And we reinforce veiled power structures that exist within circles. And I think that was a big one that we realized in this organization, that there were these structures of power and they were harder to find. Because people didn't have a title, it was harder to know who had the power, but we started to realize it when we got into the circle meetings, and we started to see how people would avoid the circle meetings to make decisions outside of the circle meetings. So what's the pattern? Use the circle meeting as a ritual, as a ritualized space. Use WhatsApp for reminders and quick questions, and don't let people make decisions there. Use tribal spaces for having fun and connection. And again, distribute authority to roles and generate flow and greater equivalence and effectiveness. So we feel that the more that we can really get to a level of roles where roles have authority and autonomy, then we can really get these tensions flowing and decisions can be made much quicker. Okay. Everything belongs to everyone. So this was something that we really felt. people had a really difficult time, for example, bringing proposals to the meetings, to the circle meeting. I know, but how can I bring a proposal to the meeting? We have to do it together, because they were really used to forming proposals together, or forming they would call it forming the image. And so in the beginning, when we say, no, but you can bring a proposal, because you're still going to have space to improve it together using consent decision making. No, but I can't do that. So there was this feeling that everything belongs to everyone. And so what are the bad habits of that? What does that cause? You miss out on ideas. Exactly. Yeah. What else?
The majority can.
Oh, yes. Exactly. What else? Slow, not effective.
You can
very
read
slow.
it.
Oh yeah, very slow, because I'm lose time. Yeah, exactly. Okay, Nara, let's see what we have. This was a big one for us, and it took a really, really long time for people to feel comfortable bringing their own proposals to the meeting. So when this happens, the decision belongs to no one. You know, no one's taking responsibility for a proposal or for any decision. There's lack of respect for dominions. Members don't develop a sense of responsibility towards the organization. No room for mistakes. Information bias, which is what somebody said. More people doesn't mean a better decision. In fact, when there are fewer people, usually we can make a better decision. So when we have 1 or 2 people bringing a proposal, we've already thought about it. And so now there's just some tweaking that needs to take place. And when we do this, when everything belongs to everyone, it develops a culture based on dependence in the place of autonomy. Okay, so what are the patterns that we can use?
And the word pattern is in Portuguese, but it's the same word.
Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So circles have authority to make decisions within the limits given to them by the above circle. When one doesn't agree with a decision made, talk to the LO of the circle or put attention on the backlog. So people understand, you know, I still have a space where I can bring my tensions up if I don't agree with somebody, with something, a decision made. And what's really important is circles need to feel that they can test decisions where they can make mistakes without judgment or punishment. And that was something that we really needed to work on. Feedback was very difficult, and we needed to let people know, listen, this is the way that we can innovate. This is the way that we can get things moving. This is the way that we can test and learn. So there we go. Okay. Everyone needs to be present. So there was this idea, no, we can't make a decision if not everyone from the circle's here. There was always this idea. And I think I'll just go right to the answer here, Nara, because I think this is kind of maybe a little bit more obvious, you know. So what happened was, when everyone needed to be present, we were taking the authority away from the secretary to assume responsibility for scheduling meetings. People would say, no, but if everyone can't come, we can't have a meeting. So, and the secretary would be like, oh, okay, so I'll try and find a different date. And so not only did we make it feel like the secretary didn't have authority to do her job, but it also made people feel like meetings aren't a priority. So, and when people didn't come and decisions were made, absent members were often bothered by the decisions because they felt like they had to be there. So we created this kind of, initially we created this feeling that, oh, you know, everyone does need to be present. So if somebody's not, they have the right to be pissed off if they don't like the decision. But then what we worked on was that we need to honor the energy of the people that are there, which is what we feel sociocracy is about. If you can't go to the circle meeting, okay, that's fine. Whoever's there, they have the autonomy to make the decisions for the circle, and they can be tested. And then what happens after, we can adjust the agreements that we make. So what are the patterns that we can work on? Meetings go as planned with whoever is present. Decisions are recognized by circle members and tested. Tensions can be raised after and can be dealt with through the proper channels. And it's very important to have a meeting, the rhythm of our meetings set so that people know, you know what, this is a priority, and this is when the day that the meetings are going to be, and I need to be there. And if I can't, okay, I'll just have to see after what the decisions are and apply them.